All right, so we're going to talk about measurement today. And I always like to begin the discussion, let's see if that works, yes, with the why. The why is really about the growth opportunity for our industry, for digital out-of-home. I think folks are probably very familiar with this chart that shows the total ad spend pie in the US, at least for 2021. And out-of-home as a category has its humble 3% of the pie. Digital out-of-home is just 1% of that 3%. But of course, the big opportunity is that blue digital slice, 67%. This is actually 2021 data. It's probably well north of 70% by now of all ad spend, and the whole pie is about $300 billion now. 70% of that spend is digital, online, mobile, social, and so on. And all of that spend in the blue portion transacts based on impressions. A viewable impression being the opportunity for one consumer to see an instance of one ad. That is how all digital media is planned, is bought, is measured, and so forth. And so we want to be able to tap into that pool of revenue by being measurable in terms of impressions as well. And it's not actually just the 67 or 70%. The second biggest slice there is TV at 22%. This is an article that came out in Ad Exchanger a couple of weeks ago. With TV as well, you're starting to see a shift from GRPs or gross rating points to this idea of impressions. That's actually gaining even more steam with the growth of CTV as well. So we're really not just talking about the 70% that's digital, but the 90% that is digital and TV is pretty much transacted on impressions today. So it should be pretty simple, right? We take digital out of home, this medium that we all know and love, for all the reasons that we've heard about all day, that Francois and Barry and others talked about. You can target your audience, generate massive reach. There's more engagement, there's more trust than any other channel. The CPMs are actually too damn cheap. There's no bot fraud, it's always viewable, it's brand safe, and so forth. So you take all of that goodness, you combine it with the ability to measure and deliver based on impressions and related metrics to that, like reach and frequency, and there you go. We get to start moving that money from the blue portion of the pie, and that's it, right? Sort of. That is an important piece of the story, but there are challenges. One of the challenges, probably the biggest challenge, stems from the fact that unlike impressions in the 90% of the world with TV, well, with digital in particular, when an ad is shown on a tablet, on a laptop, on a mobile phone, there is the presumption that that is being consumed by one and only one person. And of course, in our medium, as depicted in some of these lovely shots, we know that screens are delivering ads that are going to be seen by multiple people at once. And so that's captured by this concept of an impression multiplier that we affectionately call ImpX. And as we have, since our mission is to move money over from the blue part of the pie into that narrow 3% where we live in out-of-home and digital out-of-home, as we do that, we get questions from programmatic buyers, from digital buyers about this impression multiplier that they haven't really come across before. The first question, of course, is what is it? And as we explain it and as folks start to get their head around it, they start to ask more questions. For example, there was an instance of one buyer that looked at the impression multiplier for a particular piece of inventory on a particular campaign and did the math and figured out that the number of impressions served in that instance was actually larger than the legal occupancy limit of the venue in question in which the ad was being served. Obviously not ideal. We often get questions as to why an impression multiplier may be identical across lots of different venues of a certain type. Let's say it's convenience stores or what have you, and it's the same number at every store no matter where it is, which, by the way, may be okay, but the question is why? Why is that? Similarly, at different points in time, if it's the same at 9 in the morning or 9 at night, maybe that's okay. Maybe there's a reason for that, but buyers want to understand why that is, if that's the case. We've also seen the reverse question asked, which is there's two similar venues in a similar location. Let's stick with convenience stores, maybe two on different sides of the street, but maybe they're being measured by different vendors and have very different results when they should be perhaps similar. So again, why is that? Another question that comes up is why is it fractional, right? In the blue pie, right, blue part of the pie, the world is integers. Every impression is just a binary, instance of an ad being served, yes or no. But in our world, the impression multiplier can be fractional. Again, why is that? And sometimes it can be fractional in less than 1, like half. How do you serve half an impression? Again, there are good answers to all of these questions that I'm sure many of us in the room are familiar with, but the rest of the world may not be. And so we, as an SSP, as Place Exchange, we're getting asked these questions a lot, especially as we try to move that money over. In fact, the answers to those questions were part of the reason why we built a product called Purview that was designed to facilitate impression measurement for digital out-of-home. But we know we're not the only ones getting asked. In addition to all of our other SSP friends in the industry, we know that media owners are getting asked the question. We know that agencies and DSPs and certainly measurement providers are getting asked these questions as well. Well, what if we don't answer them, by the way? What if we just ignore this and don't get this right, don't sort of rise to these challenges? Well, let's take a look at what happens when, in other channels and in similar industries, when you don't get it right. Nielsen, of course, known primarily for measuring television, part of their TV measurement actually extends to out-of-home screens, right? When people are watching a show on TV, most of those TVs are in living rooms, but some are in bars or airports and so on. And there was an issue when they miscounted impressions delivered on digital out-of-home screens with respect to television shows. That was an error to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, which you contrast that to the size of our industry to begin with, that's a pretty big number. Sticking with Nielsen for a minute, they lost their accreditation for measuring TV altogether because of issues that arose in terms of changes in viewing patterns during the pandemic, which weren't reflected in their data. That caused them to at least temporarily lose their MRC accreditation, which was, of course, a very big deal. It actually opened the door to a lot of new measurement solutions pouring into the television space. CTV, probably the largest and second fastest growing channel at the moment. There was a study that showed $1 billion in CTV advertising was basically miscounted because the ads were shown when the TV wasn't on. The big boys aren't immune from this either. Facebook also was called out for issues with its counting of how ads were delivered. And of course, all of this can ultimately lead to the F word, fraud, that F word. And that's not good, right? We talk correctly about the fact that we don't have issues with bot fraud the way you have with the online world. But if you're buying something, paying for something, and not getting what it is you thought that you were buying, that is an issue. And of course, we want, as an industry, to avoid that kind of situation. And so as Barry alluded to earlier, the DPAA has launched a impression measurement committee. It consists of the folks from all the logos you see on the page here. And there's a working group within that, and I'd like to call out the members of that group, Kavita Chan from Captivate, Aaron Castile from Simon Media, Edith Gagne and Ryan Pogge from Broadsign, Romulus Stoyan from Hivestack, and Danielle Rind from Talon. I've had the pleasure of working with that group on efforts to address these questions. How do we bring more transparency to the industry? And the first output of this committee is going to look like this. It's going to be 2 questionnaires, one for media owners, asking questions like, what are the data sources that are used? What are the methodologies behind that? Whether you work with an external party or do it internally, and questions about the measurement outputs that come out of that process, and also a questionnaire for SSPs like Place Exchange, Hivestack, Vistar, Broadsign, and so forth. When that data comes to you, what is the process by which you ingest it? Is there anything you do to the data before it's in its, quote, final form, and so on. And so the idea is for all of us in the industry to fill this out. It's not going to ask for anything proprietary or confidential. It's sort of vital stats, basic information, designed to help bring more transparency to the buy side around some of those questions that we talked about before. The DPAA will host and publicize this library and excuse me, and keep it up to date. And so lastly, again, since I mentioned, we ourselves have built a measurement product for the out-of-home and digital out-of-home space called Purview, wanted to share our perspective about what is important when tackling this topic. It is not rocket science, but there are some nuances that I think that I think are important to understand. First, it's critically important to have up-to-date information that changes, right? There are solutions out there that may update only annually. We talked earlier about Nielsen losing its accreditation because it didn't keep up with changes in consumer patterns arising from the pandemic. Pandemic certainly will change things, but there can be other reasons that things change, and it's critically important to have data that is always up to date. Relatedly, measurement really needs to happen at the individual display level, even ad play level, in order to support not just programmatic, but other types of buying and selling as well. Probably not ideal to have the same number at every location at every single time, but to really have the factors that influence different numbers at different places and times. An important use case that we've seen, well, there are really two main use cases we've seen with buyers, right? One is for planning, right? They want to be able to understand, if I execute this media plan, how many impressions will it deliver, what kind of reach and frequency will I get, but also looking in the rearview mirror when the campaign actually delivered, what did that look like? Those two things probably shouldn't be the same unless you have a crystal ball. The weather might have been different, or the plan might have executed differently than, or the media might have executed differently. There's always a difference between actual and estimates, so the tool should be able to both produce estimates for the future, but also measure what actually delivered in the past, and buyers expect those will look different. Very important one. So most media plans that run through our platform, they're targeting a broad range of inventory. They're not just buying billboards or just buying taxis or just buying elevators. They're buying a mix of media. And the way the industry is kind of structured today, there are some measurement solutions that really only work with a subset of media types. So you're getting measurement from your billboards here and measurement for your elevators over there. And you can't really just staple those two things together. They probably use different data sources and different methodologies. And there's duplication, right? A consumer exposed to a billboard may have also seen an ad in an elevator. So you have to account for that duplication of reach. So it's important to have a solution that is industry-wide. I only said the word programmatic twice in this presentation. I thought I wasn't going to say it at all. But everything I'm saying does not just apply to programmatic. It doesn't matter whether it's sold through programmatic pipes or through a direct sales channel. It doesn't even just apply to digital. Everything I've said today in this presentation applies to static out-of-home too, vinyl billboards. So this is really a category discussion. It's not just about programmatic or digital out-of-home. This I feel very strongly about as well. Again, go back to the first slide. The goal here is to move money from the 90% of the pie over to our channel. Let's make that easy. Let's not put different metrics and definitions in front of folks. If they're buying based on impressions and they want 1 million impressions over here, let's show them what 1 million impressions there looks like. Let's use the same metrics. Let's use the same language. And let's not put up artificial blockers to spend, hold ourselves to a certainly not lower nor higher standard. Let's make it easy to move the money over by talking the same language. And it's got to be granular, right? When you're talking about measuring reach, frequency, impressions, you can do it at an aggregate population level, but oftentimes buyers want to understand reach, frequency, impressions delivered against their particular audience, whether that's demographics, customers, what have you, and also for smaller geographic slices. Just a few more, easily explainable. So this is a big thing that has come up when I talked about those questions that buyers asked earlier. The answer can't be a black box, right? There has to, yes, there can be some secret sauce, something proprietary in there, but at a high level, it has to be easy to explain and understand what are the inputs, what methodology is applied to those, what assumptions might be tacked on, and what are the outputs. And if you can't do that, you're not going to build the important foundation of credibility and trust that is needed here. It should be easy to update information, and people are installing new screens every day, hopefully. And so it should be a pretty quick ramp-up time to get data for new screens or change things if the data is refreshed, and obviously easy to share that wherever it needs to go, to platforms, to buyers, what have you. it must align with third-party standards. Unfortunately, today in out-of-home, no measurement provider is accredited because there is no accreditation standard out there yet. The MRC is working on one for out-of-home, and I believe strongly that anyone providing measurement in the space should go through a process where you have independent third-party auditors look at the data, the methodology, the outputs, so that, again, you build that foundation of trust and credibility. And last but not least, it should not break the bank. It should be affordable for all involved. I think if we do all these things and get it right, we're going to be a long way towards moving some of that 90% over to our channel. Thank you.